Mr. Chandler, how are you doing? Nice to see you.
I'm well, thank you. Nice to see you as well.
Good. Are you enjoying the, oh, actually, don't tell us. I don't want to know if you're enjoying your new job.
Okay, I won't tell you.
Are you doing well? Is it going well? Is there any learning curve or just jumped right in?
It is going very well. I'm very happy, but there is a very steep learning curve. Western is a very big and complex organization.
Yes, indeed. It is a machine.
And I do still miss LPS a little bit.
Oh, good. Thank you for adding that
Yes,
piece after a long
absolutely.
pause. But no, that's
Always will be
good to
number
hear.
one in my heart.
Well, good luck and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have so many people on the screen. Jen, are we? See Jesse, the mayor. Are we missing anybody?
Our meetings are getting so popular. I can't keep track either, even for the minutes. I
Or
don't see the mayor yet.
oh, I see him.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
yes,
we
I
have
do.
everyone.
Right here. It's hard when you don't see their faces.
Perfect. Okay, I think we can get started. I think we have the full group with us. So it is 2:01 p.m. A couple of housekeeping matters before we jump in. As you know, we're still meeting virtually. Every month I say the same thing. Every month I say maybe next month will be different. I do actually think that we are coming into in-person meetings, maybe early summer, late spring. So we'll aim for that. But I'm anticipating that March will probably still be virtual. And again, we'll take it month by month as we assess public health recommendations, what the numbers look like, and so on to be safe. Obviously, a very, very warm welcome to Ms. Nancy Branscombe, who was appointed by the province 2 days ago, took her oath of office yesterday, and is jumping right in, has been with us since 8:30 this morning. So already fully involved, and we are very, very happy to have her. Now we are back at the full complement of 7 members. And so a big welcome to Ms. Branscombe. And then one final little note of interest, the Louis Correa Trailblazers Award were last night. Very inspiring event. I think I saw Inspector Price was amongst the people watching. Very inspiring words. He brought words from the Correa family and shared with the board, and it was wonderful to see these incredible leaders of tomorrow, well, today already, receiving the Trailblazer Award and a nice little financial award along with that as well. So I'll call the meeting to order, and let's start with any disclosures of interest. Seeing none, we'll move right along. Introduction of new business. I'm going to add one to the agenda, and with the board's permission, I'd like to put it in right after the minutes, and that is going to be an update from the chief about the public order deployment. So can I get someone to move that we add that new business item as number 5? Moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Helmer. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We have minutes of the January 20th public meeting. Can I have a mover and seconder to approve or adopt those minutes? Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Ms. Walker. All in favor? And that is carried as well. Chief, would you like to give us a bit of an update in terms of those deployments?
Thank you, Chair. Sure. So the board and the public are well aware of events in Ottawa and elsewhere that continue to unfold, not only provincially, but across the country. I've kept the board informed of our involvement, and certainly there's been reports in the media as well that we've had a contingent of officers deployed to some of those locations, most recently in Windsor earlier this week. They're, of course, working with members of a number of other police services and agencies. It's a coordinated effort, obviously. Without wading into any of the deployment details, I just want to say how incredibly proud and thankful I am, and I know the deputies both share this, insofar as how our members have stepped up and conducted themselves under the leadership of Inspector Ryan Scrivens of our uniform division over the last few weeks in very difficult circumstances. These are officers who fill a variety of roles, important roles within the organization, who have basically set aside their regular work and uprooted themselves from their families and on very little notice and left town to assist with this large coordinated response. I can tell you that they have been very instrumental and effective on a number of fronts throughout this ordeal and with relation to the tasks they've been assigned. And it's really an amazing display of training, professionalism, and work ethic on their part. So true professionals, very proud. I just want to publicly thank them and recognize their work at this time, knowing that there's still work to be done. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Chief. Does anyone on the board have any questions for the chief? Okay. Chief, as you know, and I think this goes without saying, the board has also felt very proud of the work that the London Police Service has done, the professionalism that they're showing. We appreciate it must be a tremendous sacrifice. I know it's not exactly warm outside, and I know what's interesting is every time you and I talk, I always say I hope they come home soon. And you always express to me, you know, this is what they do. This is what they love to do. This is the reason they put on their uniforms every day. And that really made an impression on me. It's like, you're absolutely right. This is what they've trained to do. So we really do appreciate them being out there in the front lines. Next up is the membership in the CAPG. So just for some of the newer members here, the London Police Services Board is part of several umbrella organizations. So there is an Ontario Association of Police Services Board, which is our provincial umbrella group. And then there's the Canadian Association for Police Governance, which is obviously the national group. And we had voted to continue our membership in some of the other associations. And today we are moving to continue our membership with the Canadian Association of Police Governance. So some of the things that the benefits from that are conferences, they have workshops, they have continuing education, they have meetings between police governance and board chairs and board members across Canada, which are usually very interesting discussions. So I'm hoping there's support from the board to move that we approve payment for the 2022 membership fee of $5,100. And that is moved by the mayor, seconded by member Chabar. Any discussion or questions? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Next up is an update about membership. As everyone knows, apart from this main police board meeting, we do have two subcommittees because of obviously member Lang leaving last month. We were quite down in the membership for the Finance and Administration Committee, which was until and this morning at least made up only of Councillor Helmer and Mayor Ed Holder. Fortunately, we have two people who've stepped up to also join that committee. And so Ms. Walker and Ms. Branscombe will both be joining the Finance and Administration Committee. And in addition to that, Ms. Branscombe has put her name forward to be part of the Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Panel. So with the board's approval, if we can get a motion to update the membership as I just described, moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any questions about that? Great. All in favor? And that is carried. That's fantastic. That means the Finance and Administration Committee will have 4 members, which will make it, I'm sure, a little bit less of a workload. Moving right along, we have the Sexual Assault Investigation Annual Mandatory Board Report, and Deputy Chief McIntyre, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So this report comes to you as part of adequacy, but also because of as a part of board policy. And really what it looks at is it requires the chief to report on the number of sexual assault cases, the number of cases reviewed by the advocacy group and the recommendations that they made, and then the number of times that a victim is requested police release the name of the accused. And we did not follow their wishes in that regard. So I can tell you that in 2021, there were 534 sexual assaults reported. 216 of those met the mandate for review. 1 case was reviewed. There were no recommendations flowing from that. And we, of course, had no cases in which the victim didn't requested the name of the accused to be released. If I were to take you to the 216, what does that mean? So the cases that meet the threshold for review are cases in which there are no criminal charges laid. And there's also a slight criteria that the complainant themselves must be 16 or over and involve suspects over the age of 18. So there is some criteria that limits the number of cases that do get reviewed. So that's the criteria before you. I think, you know, one of the big speaking points to this is, why are there no cases being reviewed? And so I think it's important. Obviously, the world and the state of the pandemic has kind of restricted that to some degree. I can tell you a couple of things that have flowed from these meetings, though, that I think is beneficial, and with the hope to get the review back on track. So they do meet virtually monthly, but just to discuss. It's hard to review cases, of course, electronically. There's some confidentiality issues, et cetera, with doing so in that framework. But our relationship with those community partners is excellent. And, you know, they don't hesitate to provide feedback, because the feedback they give us is well received and then implemented. And we know that in 2000, when this came about, there was an extensive shift in our process here. You'll recall that the procedures as it relates to sexual assault investigations was drastically overhauled. That trauma-informed lens was embedded. And really that shift was to say, when an investigation comes in, when CID, our criminal investigation side, takes that case, it's done with excellence. And how do we ensure that those benchmarks are in place? How do we ensure the training is in place and all of those things? So we've seen a drastic improvement in quality, despite, irregardless of the review being done. So I just wanted to highlight that to the public, just so that they understand kind of, you know, definitely the feedback is taken, and we've done great things with that feedback and have an amazing relationship with them. So I can report that in April, they plan to be back in person, back reviewing these cases. I think a different strategy needs to be in play for them to review, because they're not going to catch up, and nor could they do over 200 a year. So that's unrealistic. That's my own personal opinion. And I think I would hope that they kind of streamline how they're going to select those cases for review, and then just accomplish more reviews. But of course, that is a subcommittee and not under my purview to kind of dictate. But I hope that gives some explanation behind the report, but I'm open to any feedback you may have or comments.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Any discussion? Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Deputy Chief. I really appreciate what you've had to say. And I certainly agree with you that there's been a huge shift in the way officers are conducting interviews with victims of sexual assault. And I think that has had a lot to do with the partnership between police and the community. The statistics are a little bit alarming, and I just wanted to speak to those if I could. And so we know that only 6% of sexual assaults are ever actually reported to police, and that makes it the most underreported crime. And that's pretty phenomenal, that we're still facing such low levels of disclosure to police. But we know that there was, in 2017, the Unfounded report written by Robin Doolittle in the Globe and Mail. And Chief Perry at the time was one of the first four police services to come out and say there would be a review process, which gave victims of sexualized violence, but also advocates, a lot of hope. And the goal really around that was to provide oversight and accountability. So it was a huge responsibility community volunteers from various agencies took on. So now we know that COVID has come and is still upon us. And in 2021, only one case was reviewed, which was one more than that was reviewed in 2020, meaning 0 in 2020. So of the 534 sexual assaults reported to the London Police Service, we've heard from Deputy Chief McIntyre that only 216, or actually of concern, 216 met the mandate for review by the committee, which means no charges were laid. It also could mean that some of them did not fit into the criteria, but the majority likely were because there were no charges laid. So if you break that down, we could say that 40% approximately of the reports to police did not lead to criminal charges. So that is, of course, alarming, and we know that COVID has had a big part to play in all of that. So COVID has disproportionately impacted on women and girls in the community and across the country. And in this case, it certainly has impacted on victims of sexual assault. And I always say that, you know, while the rest of the world stopped, the lives of women and the horrific atrocities that they suffer continue. And we have not been able to keep up with that because everything has been closed down. And so I do wish we could move more immediately than waiting until April. And I say that because the agencies that are involved in this issue are all deemed to be essential services. All have had at least 3 shots. Sorry, 2 shots. Most of them have had 3 shots. There are huge classroom size rooms in London Police Service building. And so it would not be an unsafe practice to invite these advocates in, noting that they could have sufficient distancing and mask up and have other PPE in place, barriers, for instance, or what else is necessary. And that would allow them to move forward immediately. And my concern is that we've lost 2 years of any sort of review at this point. And of course, you can't go back 2 years for 2 reasons. One, the workload is just overwhelming. But secondly, the lives of women go on, and they're not going to wait for this to happen. But I think if we could get in there on a more immediate basis, we could certainly pick up right away and move forward and appropriately review the files that need to be reviewed. So I understand the dilemma. I feel very sad because so many victims feel that their voices have not been heard, or at least they report that. And it's usually women and girls who are most impacted by delays in service or delays in reviews or all sorts of delays. And I am wondering if there wouldn't be any way that it could be pushed forward with the proper protocols and PPE, so that there could, or at least an invitation extended to see if there's a willingness on the part of the committee to come forward in March instead of April. And I know you'll say, oh, it's just 1 month, but 1 month can certainly make a difference in the life. No, I'm not saying you would say that, Trish, I'm just saying people could say it's only a month, but I am suggesting that a month, when so many women have already waited 2 years, seems like, again, a really long time. And I think if we could do it somehow, it would offer hope to those women that have been trapped in their homes and assaulted over and over again. And I think it would be a really positive thing in their lives.
Thank you for those comments, and through you, Chair, I absolutely can reach out to the Chair to discuss that and to really provide that kind of lens that you have back to them and see what their availability. We do, you're absolutely accurate. We do have space here. We can make those arrangements and put the offer out so that they know that that opportunity is available for them. If I were to go back, you know, just one thing about the 216, I just want to share with you, and it does highlight more concern with process, but is the out of the 216, some of those cases we could have laid charges in, but that the next step is driven by the victim, but that doesn't mean so maybe they don't want to have charges later. They don't feel they want to move that file to the, you know, their case into a public courtroom or all of those things. So it still really highlights really the stigma and some of the work that still needs to be done well beyond the investigation itself, but in those other processes to continue. But it doesn't make it better. I just wanted to say to you that some of those we could have laid charges. We paused and we really let the victim direct our next steps, and, you know, just in that one trauma-informed piece, but it doesn't mean it's not there isn't work to do, I guess, in short. But thank you for your feedback.
And that's actually a really good point, because we know that we have to allow victims to lead this process for sure. But just sort of to get some perspective on that, we know that the rate of sexual assault against Indigenous women is approximately 3 times higher than among non-Indigenous women. Indigenous women are often discriminated in all levels of the justice system. And are oftentimes very fearful, either to report or to have charges laid. And we also know that the rate of sexual assault against people with disabilities is about 2 times higher than those with no disabilities. Again, really vulnerable group of people that often don't have the supports in place to go through a criminal court proceeding or to file charges. And I think it's also important to note that many studies will suggest that when women of color report sexual violence, and in particular rape, their experiences are often taken less seriously within all sections of the criminal justice system. So we need to somehow find a better way to reach out to diverse communities, to make sure they know that they will be believed and that they are steering the process. And that's something that I think the committee, the review committee, could also take a look at. But I don't mean to be critical, because I really appreciate the opportunity police have given to communities to review this information. It's really critical. And I also really appreciate the respect shown by officers towards changing how they're doing things to make it a lot easier and respectful for women and girls.
Thank you so much, Ms. Walker. It's one of those times where we really, really do value and appreciate the wealth of experience to bring to the table, and making sure that the board and everyone is aware of the reality. And Deputy Chief McIntyre, thank you for that update. Any other questions from the board? Okay, can I have a mover and seconder to receive the sexual assault investigation mandatory board report for informational purposes? Moved by Ms. Walker, seconded by Councillor Helmer. All in favor? And that is carried. Next up, we have the Crime Call and Public Disorder Analysis Adequacy Standards Report. This is another mandatory report. Deputy Chief McIntyre.
Thanks again, Chair, through you. This report looks at the 2021 data for crime call and public disorder. So what really the driver of this report comes from our crime analysis unit. That is a group of 6 civilian members that are incredibly trained in all things data analytics. And if I were to take the report, it's fairly detailed, so I won't reiterate it all, but if I were just to highlight a couple of initiatives or changes that have occurred since last year, one I would say would be that they're now embedded. A recent shift where we actually, instead of a standalone unit, we embedded each of the analysts into high areas of, so down into persons crime, with really that analyst has specificity in all things persons crime, and a tremendous asset specific to GIS and general investigation, sorry for my acronyms, to our business analytics unit to drive some of these things and really highlight how can we do things better? How can we be more efficient with the resources we have? So a couple big things that came from this year is their work on the harm index system. So the harm index system is really a measure of seriousness of crime to victims, not just the total number of crimes. So if I were to explain that in relation to gun violence, they were heavily embedded in a recent project that we did on gun crime, and not specifically looking at who has a firearm, but who is most likely to use the firearm, the harm that is caused by the item, or the type of drug that is more likely to cause high harm in the community. So really looking at not just volume, but out of that volume, how do we really drill into prioritize our resources to combat that? The second piece that I just wanted to talk about would be the prolific offender report. Much of our work in the downtown core related to work in this area, and it was specific about, we often know that there's maybe a handful of people that are committing a large volume of the different calls, or creating the large volume of the calls for service that we respond to. So how can we identify those people? And then how can we reach out to community partners and get them the support that they need and those community interventions before they feel the need to offend for whatever, and it could be just out of necessity. So a lot of work was done in relation to that. So the additional details are of course in that report, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of those big initiatives that were driving kind of what we did. And if we that work allows us to shift out of a reactive model into more of a proactive framework, which is of course everybody's that's where we need to go here. So I just highlight those a couple initiatives for you, and I'm open to any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Deputy Chief McIntyre? Excellent. That was a comprehensive report. You're right. So it's very useful to be able to read that ahead of time. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the crime call and public disorder analysis adequacy report for informational purposes? Moved by Councillor Helmler, seconded by Ms. Branscombe. All in favor? And that is carried. Next up is the Freedom of Information Unit. This is the annual statistical summary report about freedom of information requests. Deputy Chief Betts.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the board. This is, as you said, an annual report, and it really is just for your information. It's something that we are required to report to the Information Privacy Commission by March 1st of every year. So as you can see, we're under the deadline and have already made our submission. I would point out there's been a 15.2% increase in FOI requests this year over last year. And really that's probably attributed to the gradual reduction of the limitations associated to COVID. So as things have continued to open up, so too to the workload. You'd see that in the statistics charts that are attached to the report itself. And this is probably one of the few areas in the organization where we can say with some relative confidence that the workload is consistent throughout the course of the year. So, and that is in turn reflected in the annual revenue. So the annual revenue is approximately $26,000 that come from the FOI reports, which is virtually unchanged from 2020 and is pretty consistent. And, we did have 46 overdue reports in 2021. Again, this is going to be reflected by COVID restrictions, some of the distancing that was required in the workplace. And we had some turnover in that unit up to and including the supervisor in that unit. So when changes in personnel happen, there's a transition time to get the next folks up to speed. And they've done an admirable job doing that, because I'm happy to report we have no overdue reports now. So they were able to clear off everything forthwith. So subject to any questions you may have, that is the report, and I just make the recommendation you receive it for your information.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Betts. Any questions for the Deputy Chief about the FOI? Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through you to Deputy Chief Betts, you said that with things opening up, you expected an increase in volume, and so we've seen this increase. So I'm wondering, because I don't remember last year's report, was there a reduction between 2019 and 2020? So now are we seeing that bounce back?
Thank you for that question, and through you, Chair, absolutely. We did see a reduction in 2020. In fact, the first quarter of 2020 started off very strong. The second quarter dipped down significantly, and then really in Q3 and Q4 it started to ramp up again to this typical numbers we would see per quarters.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, can I have a mover and seconder to receive that FOI report? Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Mr. Jabbar. All in favor? And that is carried. Next up, we have public correspondence. So quick update, two of those, there's 3 letters included in the package. 2 of those letters were drafted and sent by the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel. One of those was to Minister Jones, the Solicitor General, with respect to appointing a Black or Indigenous member to the board. Another one from the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel was a letter to the community, encouraging diverse applicants to apply and encouraging them to contact the ministry with respect to increasing diversity on the board. And the last item is a letter that the police board, as opposed to the anti-racism advisory panel, so this was a letter from us as a board to Solicitor General Jones and Minister McNaughton, also asking for a Black or Indigenous members to be appointed. I'd like to just point out really quickly that those letters went out prior to Ms. Branscome's appointment being made. So that gives you a little bit of context there. If you don't mind, Mr. Chabar, as vice chair, would you take on the chair role? I wouldn't mind making a couple of personal comments.
Absolutely.
Thank you, and through you at this point. I debated quite a bit about whether or not I wanted to say anything further about those letters. And I wanted to start by being very, very clear. None of the comments I'm about to make take away whatsoever from my deep admiration and respect for Ms. Branscombe and my happiness that she has joined the board, my complete confidence that she is going to be an incredible asset. I have admired Ms. Branscombe for years. So I'm actually quite excited about working with her on the board and looking forward to getting to know her better, because I used to just be an admirer from afar. So this is really an excellent appointment, and nothing I'm about to say should take away from that at all. And that is actually why I debated whether or not I wanted to say anything, because I didn't want to overshadow her accomplishments or make her feel unwelcome, because truly nothing but warm welcome from all of us, I know. And then I started getting anonymous messages and being tagged in tweets saying that I was racist, accusing me of putting diversity above merit. And after the fourth or fifth one of those, I decided that I did want to speak to this and speak to this message that when we seek diverse representation, we're taking away from meritocracy and merit-based appointments. And I just wanted to start by saying I've had the honor of serving with Councillor Mohammed Salih, who was our first Black chair of the London Police Services Board. I've had the honor of serving with Ms. Vanessa Ampton-Smith, who was the first Indigenous appointment to the board. And I can tell you that working with them was incredibly eye-opening. And their presence on the board made a significant difference because of their lived experiences and I mean, just the knowledge that they brought to the table. And I worry that some of that knowledge has been lost. And I can even tell you that even though I am a racialized person, I can't claim any significant amount of understanding of what it is like to grow up Black or Indigenous in this community. And honestly, I'm sometimes almost embarrassed that I'm considered a diverse appointment, because I don't feel that I truly represent the amount of diversity in this community. And I wanted to take this opportunity to make it crystal clear over and over again that seeking greater representation on boards and on agencies and commissions is not taking away from merit. This is this ludicrous false dichotomy that keeps rearing its head over and over again. And I cannot stress this enough. Asking for representation is not a move away from merit. In fact, it is a recognition that we live in a system where over and over again, certain members of the population are overrepresented at every level and have advantages at every level and are hired more frequently, are paid more, have better access to opportunities. You are less likely to be hired, appointed, elected if you're a racialized person, more so if you're Black or Indigenous. Ms. Walker pointed out the disproportionate sexual assaults that occur on Indigenous women. There's some pretty terrible stats out there. Out of 2,200 board positions in Canada, eight board members are Indigenous. 8 out of 2,200. That is 0.3%. We can't possibly be saying that there are only 8 Indigenous people that had sufficient merit to be on those boards, and that the rest of the representation had more merit. That we can't possibly be saying that, because that would be false. There's actually another study that of cities across Canada, including London, Ontario, and among 1,639 corporate board membership, 13 were Black. 13 out of 1,600. That was the level of representation, 0.8%. And so here I am, and I got to tell you, I'm so tired of having this conversation. I'm tired of people accusing me of reverse racism as if that's a thing. It's not. I'm tired of people, this is one of the comments that came across on social media, this woke politics, and disdainfully, like being aware of the disproportionate lack of representation is a bad thing. But you know what? Go ahead. Like, honestly, does not bother me, because I know you're wrong. I know you're wrong when you accuse me of reverse racism. When those people are talking about meritocracy, they're not actually talking about merit. They're talking about maintaining the status quo. What they're saying is that we should ignore all of the things that ensure certain members of the population are overrepresented on boards. It actually presumes that we live in a world where merit is the only thing that matters, that there's no implicit bias or explicit bias. We don't live in that world right now. So the issue for me is that when we ask for representation, it's not about ignoring merit. On the contrary, it's about ensuring that there is merit by increasing the representation of underrepresented voices from marginalized communities. Diversity doesn't replace merit. It is merit. It doesn't replace merit. Diversity is merit. I think that's maybe the lasting message I want to leave with the board. And I just think that the failure to have an open and transparent appointment system that openly uses an equity and diversity and inclusion lens and encourages those kinds of applicants is a disservice to the community and needs to change. Because if that doesn't change, nothing will. And it has to start somewhere. The status quo isn't okay anymore. 2021. We need to do better. So again, just wanted to make those comments tonight. I would like, and again, speaking for myself, not speaking as the chair, I would love to see the board advocate for a more transparent and open appointment system, something that's independent, that's not partisan based, that allows those voices, that puts those voices front and centers and appoints them to various boards. So I would like to move that we write a letter to the province and advocate for a change in the appointment system. And I hope that I will find support amongst my fellow board members. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Toth. Is there any members of the board that'd like to comment? Mayor Holder?
Yeah, thanks very much. A very impassioned and thoughtful delivery and comments, Susan. I'm always mindful when we send correspondence to any order of government that we ensure it's not that it's done a little less passionately, if I can put it that way. So what would be helpful, and unless it's absolutely just clear and simple, I'd just like to look at it. I mean, if this is an issue, and I would share the concerns that there are issues around appointments, I don't know what the implications of what that would be, and I would just like to look at it and let our board look at it and put the appropriate background to it as well, because just in and by itself as a declaration, I don't think from a political standpoint to any order of government is as helpful as if we could provide some background and shape it a little bit more meaningfully. That's all. So I concur with that need. I just would like to make sure that we've politically shaped it a little bit because it's a political question. Just my input.
Thank you, Mayor Holder. Any other members like to say anything? I see Nancy Branscombe, Ms. Branscombe, and then followed by Ms. Walker. Nancy, I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Vice Chair. I want to thank Susan for her welcome. And I have to say that it's fairly evident that I'm neither Black nor Indigenous. I assume I was chosen to be a representative on the board because of my deep roots in the community, my experience with budgeting, and also governance. And so I applaud that we all have strong and different opinions. And I think that's really, for me, the issue isn't that Susan has an opinion that's strong and passionate, but that we can't talk about that stuff without people being called names. And I think on some level, that's what politics is degraded to. And I think that, you know, I have strong opinions sometimes. I may be the only one that has those opinions. But I expect that they will be listened to with respect. And if I'm voted down on certain issues, I'm okay with that, because that's why you have a board of different people, because you have to have all different perspectives. I actually think the process worked very well. I see the last 3 appointees from the province, and none of us have similar, you know, are similar. We're similar in some ways, but we're different in other ways. And so I don't feel this is as big an issue as perhaps Susan does. I guess I'd be maybe supportive with the mayor of a soft letter trying to have a more inclusive process, but I'm not interested in telling the province how they should make appointments any more than I would want to tell the city how to make appointments if there's a process in place. So I will be supporting that notion when it comes to the board. It was a thorough vetting. I just went through the process, as did Ali and Megan, and they can speak for themselves, but I felt I had an interview. I was asked a lot of questions about my knowledge about the community, about my knowledge about the advisory panels that we have, you know, what are the issues in London. It was a pretty thorough vetting, and so I feel that obviously I passed the test that they were looking for, and I was appointed. So while I respect Susan, and I have felt very welcome today, and I think she's an excellent chair, I'm not interested in taking that next step myself. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Branscombe. I believe Ms. Walker was next.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Chair. Through you, I would just like to ask if I could offer a suggestion to Madam Toth. Would that be okay, Susan?
By all means.
Okay, so I feel that decisions have been made quickly with respect to the last 3 appointments, and so there likely wasn't even time to review the letter that was originally sent, particularly by all of those various parties. And so, but we do have on the horizon individuals that will be leaving the board, and I'm wondering. So first off, I'm not big on letter writing campaigns because they are too quickly dismissed and, you know, put aside and put aside. What I am in favor of is a letter that requests a meeting, because when you go face to face, it's much more difficult to discard the views of the person that's appearing before you. I would be happy to see a letter, and you're wanting to have a kind of coordinated response to meet with each of the, you know, I'm not sure what they call it provincially, but the shadow minister to justice, for instance, or whatever they're called on a provincial level, and have meetings to just outline where you stand on this issue, because you are passionate. And I think it's a very compelling argument that you make. So I'm wondering if you would be more interested in maybe changing things a little bit to sending a letter requesting a meeting. And then secondly, I do wonder if this is the time to continue to advocate for Indigenous people or, you know, members of the Black, Indigenous, people of color, you know, Black Lives Matter. I think the timing would start now because there will be changes coming up. And I know that, like, for me, it was a very quick process. And I think the same for Nancy and the same for Ali. And so I think we kind of missed the boat this time almost, but I'm very supportive of the direction you're moving in. I would just rather see action than just a letter that kind of is easily dismissed. And maybe to start the advocacy right now for what's going to happen as members of council who have said they're leaving leave.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Are there any other members that wish to participate in the debate or discussion on this topic? I see Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I certainly support a follow-up correspondence, and I think that Ms. Walker is on the right track with, you know, if you want to really try and change somebody's mind, probably talking to them about it directly is better than writing letters. We did emphasize in the letter that we sent just in advance of the last appointment that this idea is actually in the legislation. So it's not as though it's a surprise to the province. There is a requirement on the minister to promote the availability of appointments to historically underrepresented groups. There's also a requirement on municipalities to do that. And so I think there is an opening here to really enforce that message with the province. And one of the reasons that I supported expanding the size of the police service board back when we dealt with that at city council was for this reason, so we could have more people involved in the governance of policing, more opportunities for more perspectives and people with different backgrounds to get involved in civilian oversight of policing. It used to be just a 5-person board, and it's obviously a lot fewer opportunities. So, you know, I think it's a really important thing for the community. I think it's important for overall governance function of the board. I think it's also important for building and maintaining public trust with the community and how they view policing and oversight of policing. So, you know, I guess we have different ideas about how to convince politicians to do things, but I think there's no harm in sending a letter. We've already made the point in the first letter, a follow-up letter that's asking for a meeting if Susan thinks that would be effective in talking to somebody directly about it. There's always room to improve these appointments processes. They're not perfect. They can be improved, and they need to be improved in this way specifically. So I think I would support sending a letter if the board wants to take a look at it. I think that makes sense. We often do that with this kind of correspondence. So I guess I'd second Susan's motion, and I think Ms. Walker's suggestion about requesting a meeting is probably good because I think that would give us some tangible to be asking for beyond some appointment way out in the future, which frankly for the provincial appointments is quite a ways away.
Thank you, Councillor Helmer. I think I see Councillor Cassidy's hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I also will support this motion, and I also welcome the amendment offered by Ms. Walker. I have the benefit of sitting on another body with provincial appointments. The Middlesex London Health Unit Board has 5 provincial appointments. And over the past many years, there have been 2 board members from racialized communities who've been appointed over the past many years. One still sits on the board and was appointed by the previous provincial government, and our newest board member was recently appointed by the current provincial government. And it is very hard for me to believe that over decades there are only 2 people who have applied for this board, and there are only 2 people of color who merit being appointed to this board. So the statistics speak for themselves. And I do think having a meeting to discuss being that the board should better represent the community in London, it's a discussion worth having. And again, there seems to have been a pattern on how the appointments were made for the provincial members on the health board, which seems the pattern seems a little odd to me, and I'm not just talking about the background, the racial background of individuals. So I think transparency is important. There are a lot of people that have expressed interest in this board and asked me how to apply, as well as the health board and how to apply to that, and I've sent them to the website and the public service secretariat. I'm in support of taking this direction. A conversation is not hurtful and could be very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. Any other debate or discussion amongst members of the board? Okay, seeing none, I actually would like to personally weigh in on this as well, but I feel conflicted by virtue of the fact that I've assumed the chair's position here. So would I, this is highly unorthodox, but could I maybe call on one of the other members to just momentarily take the chair spot so I can weigh in, and then I'll resume it right back for the vote portion? And just because Councillor Helmer is quite literally middle top of my screen and I'm looking at his eyes right now, Councillor Helmer, can I have you just momentarily take over this position?
Sure. I'll take over the chair. Let me know, colleagues, if you want to get on the speakers list. Go ahead, Mr. Jabbar.
Thank you kindly. So I'll keep it short, but I do want to echo the sentiments of some of the statements that were made here. I think we have to compartmentalize this discussion into a macro and a micro sense. On the macro level, I agree wholeheartedly with some of the comments that were made by Chair Toth. I think that people in this city, people in this province, people in this country are best served when governments, boards, commissions are reflective of the people that they represent. So whether we're talking about it in the context of creed, culture, race, sex, whatever it is, when government best reflects the people that they actually govern, I feel that that multiplicity of lens, of perspective, of lived experience can only serve to enrich the level of representation that we have. And we talk about it often in the context of government, whether we're talking municipal, provincial, or federal government, but it applies to local boards, to commissions, which, with respect, I think sometimes have a more meaningful impact on the day-to-day lives of people than, you know, the federal government or the provincial government. And so it's important. I feel sometimes there's a tendency, and I'm speaking generically, but there's a tendency sometimes to say, well, you know, to be potentially dismissive of that. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we do that. And so generally speaking, on the macro front, I think most rational people would say that that boards that have a multiple perspectives, multiple lenses, multiple lived experiences, whether we're talking, regardless of what we, you know, the perspectives that we bring, can only serve to better serve the interests of the community. On a micro lens, and so whether we're talking about writing letters, or we're talking about requesting meetings, or we're talking about kind of the processes of that, this has been from my understanding, and I know this is only my third meeting with the board, but I do understand that similar letters were written back in 2017 or 2019 from previous boards with previous chairs. So this isn't a new issue that's just coming to light right now. There's been a kind of a consistent historic call for this type, and it's actually working its way. I can't remember the name of the legislation right now, but it's working its way through there's a legislative aspect to this as well. And so it's not just the London Police Services Board making this call, or Windsor or Ottawa or Toronto. There's a legislative kind of central component to it, and that it's going to be, you know, working its way through the process, hopefully sooner rather than later. But in terms of the advocacy piece of this particular board, be it a letter, be it a meeting, you know what, both probably, a letter and a meeting. I would say that it's in the boards and communities' larger collective interest to advocate for this as we are. So thank you. And with that, Councillor Helmer, if you want, I'm more than happy to resume my virtual chair back there. So.
Okay, I'll turn the chair back over to you, Mr. Jabbar.
Thank you very much. With that, any further debate or discussion from any members on this topic? Okay, seeing none. I guess, well, we have Chair Toth's motion that's on the floor right now. And so, Jen, do we actually have the actual wording of that motion? I don't know if you're able to capture what the actual wording of that motion was. I've scribbled some notes down, but I suspect yours might be more accurate.
Hi, Member Shabar. I haven't actually written the motion, but I could recite it. First of all, we need to, I want to receive those 3 letters. That's the motion that I had in the agenda. But then you can let me know if this is accurate, that the board will draft a letter to the ministry requesting a meeting to discuss the process around diverse appointments to police services boards in Ontario. Fairly generic, but it covers the point. Do we need any other detail?
I think it captures it, but I'll defer to Chair Toth in terms of it's her motion, so to whether to work on the kind of the minutia of the wording there.
Yes, no, that's fine by me. Write a letter requesting and then requesting a meeting. I'm not sure. Did I catch you say meeting as well? Okay, perfect. Yep.
I see.
So we do the 2 motions separately, maybe just receive the 3 letters. We'll do that, and then we'll do the motion or whichever order. But I think they should be separate.
Yeah.
So let's do that then. Can we get a motion to receive the 3 pieces of correspondence? Can I get a mover on that? Councillor Helmer, seconder. Councillor Cassidy. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. And then the second motion, I thought I saw Ms. Branscome's hand up there for a second. So
Thanks, Vice Chair. I just want to, if all we're doing is asking for a meeting to discuss diverse appointments to police services boards, that's quite different than what I thought I heard in the first instance. So I would be able to support that because we're not telling them what to do. We're just having a discussion. If I'm interpreting it the way that I've heard it just now. So please clarify, because I could support that, but I won't go farther.
thank you, Ms. Branscombe. Chair Toth.
No, my intention was specifically to request a meeting, but to discuss changing the appointments process to ensure that appointments are being made transparently, openly, and through the equity, diversity, inclusion lens.
I guess sorry, Chair.
Ms. Branscombe, go ahead.
Just one last point. The reason I can't support that is because the assumption is that the appointments are not open and transparent, and I actually don't believe that they aren't open and transparent. So I don't mind having a discussion about diverse appointments, but I'm not going to presume that the appointments are not open and transparent. So that's the way the motion reads. I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Ms. Branscombe. I see Mayor Holder. Before I get to you, I just see Jennifer's hand up there for a second, just in the event that it might be procedural nature.
I only want to say to you that what I can do is once we've got something, I'll put it in the chat. I think we need to know what we're voting on. So I'm just typing it up. Mayor Holder can speak, and I will put something in the chat, and we can all actually look at it before voting.
Thank you. Thank you kindly. Mayor Holder.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. And I'm going to apologize. I do not want to beg out on this situation. I have at 3 o'clock that is equally critical. And so let me just share my thoughts. I'm of the same mind as Ms. Branscombe from this standpoint. I think it's totally legitimate to sit down and understand. And I say understand what their process is. So if it's to have a dialogue about what that is, but to presume a result, going in with a presumed result as opposed to, which is what it feels like to me, versus going in, I'll just say with an inquiring mind and ask the straight questions. I do like the idea that that was proposed with respect to a discussion with having a meeting. I think that Ms. Walker makes a great point. But to go in with a presumption is, I just think it has the potential to take it down a different road. And you know what? It's always a position you can come back on. If you do not like what you hear, and you bring that back to this board and say, this is precisely what we've heard, depending on who's all coming, then I think that determination can be made. So and I'm respectful of statistics, and I'm very mindful of that. But this isn't, if we're talking about this particular government's been in one term. This isn't an issue that's occurred over one term. Is there a systemic sense of bias? But quite potentially. But I think it's reasonable if it didn't all occur within one particular term of government, of which several of the members here were appointed, then I think it's reasonable to, from my standpoint, go in with an open mind and an open inquiry. But I have to apologize. I wanted to share that view, but I'm desperate to get to another call. So I can't vote by virtue of that. But if it were, absolutely to have the meeting with an open mind. And forgive me that I do have to excuse myself.
Thank you, Mayor Holder. I see Ms. Walker with her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I always feel if we can find some common ground and go in with a motion that is unanimous, it's probably in our best interest to do so. And I'm wondering if, as a first step, we could request the meeting and at the meeting indicate that there are some concerns around diversity and diverse appointments, and start there as a first place rather than letting them know right off that we want to ensure the appointments are open and transparent. I just feel really strongly that there could be a lot of momentum behind this motion, particularly from other police services boards. And if we can go in with one voice, I think we would be far more effective. And I do agree with the mayor that going in with one voice originally at the beginning to open the discussion does not preclude the board from changing that after the discussion. So I'm happy to support the motion the way it is, but if there's an opportunity to build some consensus, I think it would be a much more powerful opportunity with the government.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. And just before I get to you, Ms. Branscombe, I'm just cognizant of time here and the fact that despite the fact this is an incredibly important discussion, I think there's still a number of things on the agenda. So just to be cognizant of that as we proceed forward. Ms. Branscombe.
Yes, the only thing I would also say, and I haven't decided if I'm going to support, I can't support this motion, but the province is the only one mentioned here, but we've got appointments to this board from two governing bodies. One's municipal council and one's the provincial government. So I don't see anything reflected here for the municipality as well. So if we want to be consistent, we should be consistent.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Branscombe. Any last comments from members of the board? Councillor Helmer.
Just on the very last point that Ms. Branscombe brought up, I agree with that sentiment, and I think communicating something similar to the municipality would be a good idea. I've actually just reached out to the city manager and staff who work in the diversity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression area to let them know that this discussion was happening and that there is a positive obligation on municipalities to do some promotion around appointments to this board specifically. So sending a letter or correspondence to the city, I think, is a good idea. There certainly are, the majority of the appointments come from that body, not from the province. So I presume that Susan would be in favor of that, but I think reaching out to both of them is wise.
So am I hearing the desire for a friendly amendment to the motion to add municipal in addition to the provincial board language there? And if so, can I get a mover on that to amend the motion? Councillor Cassidy. Oh, sorry, Jen. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to know, are we talking about the motion that I pasted in here? Or are we, okay.
Yeah, so my understanding is that there's a motion that's pasted right there, and I'll just read it just because I don't know who has access to it, but that the board send a letter requesting a meeting with the ministry to discuss amending the provincial board appointment process to ensure appointments being made are open and transparent and completed with an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens, and the friendly amendment would be to add the words municipal and provincial board appointment process there, so that we're capturing both, further to the point that were made there. So I see Ms. Walker's hands up.
I'm just going to be very brief because, again, I would like to go in with one voice, and I was wondering if it would be appropriate to amend the motion by stating that the board send a letter requesting a meeting with the ministry to discuss, I guess this wouldn't suit Nancy, but to discuss amending the board appointment process to ensure diversity and inclusion. So it's not about being open and transparent. It's about making sure that the board appointment process is going to consider the importance of diversity and inclusion. And that would be, just as I say, as a first step. We can massage it after the meeting, because of course there will be a meeting. But I just feel it would be a lost opportunity if we didn't try to find some way of bringing everybody on side.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. I see Ms. Branscome's hand.
Okay, I could support it if you take out amending as well, because I think we need to find out what they do in the process and how they reflect equity and diversity and inclusion first. And so we're going in saying we want you to amend it because we're assuming that you don't do what we'd like you to do. That's the same concern I have about assuming they're not open and transparent. So as a first step, we want to meet with the ministry to discuss their provincial board appointment process in the municipality. Then we can do the next steps next. I'd be happy to support that. I guess I just don't want to go in with the assumption that we're riding in on our horse because we don't know what the process is. Once we find that out and we're not satisfied with it, you guys can do what you like then. But I'm not supporting it if we're going to them to ask them to amend it, or assuming it's not open and transparent. So that's really up to you. I'm happy either way. I can support it one way. I won't support it the other way. So.
Thank you, Ms. Branscombe. I think it probably needs Chair Toth, your input in terms of the suggested revision by Ms. Walker with regards to the language, because one of two things is going to happen. We're either going to have a vote on the existing language, or there's consensus for a further amendment there. So I guess Ms. Toth, in response to Ms. Walker's suggestion, do you have a perspective or an opinion on that?
I would say I am not terribly concerned about whether or not there is consensus. I mean, great if there is, but frankly, that's not a priority for me. The priority for me is ensuring that we have diverse representation and that the process we have right now is certainly not conducive to that. So I'm not prepared to amend my motion at this point.
Thank you, Chair Toth. All right. So in light of the foregoing, we have the motion that's currently on the floor. Chair Toth, oh, there it is right there. I was just going to say, so Chair Toth, we have the amended motion, which I'm not going to read it again, but I will say that it now includes the words municipality as well as provincial. You can all see it in the chat group right there, the exact language. Unless there's any further discussion, I'm going to get ready to call the question here, but I do see Jen followed by Ms. Walker. And again, just cognizant of time here, but go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I think we've talked language so much. I think somebody should read it. I can read it, whoever should read it. The amendment now, is that okay for me to read that so we've all heard it? In case people aren't looking in the chat. That the board send letters requesting meetings with the ministry and municipality to discuss amending the provincial board appointment process to ensure appointments are being made are open and transparent and completed with an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens. Did I capture that right? We can.
Sorry, it should just say meetings with the ministry and municipality to discuss board appointment process. Just take out provincial so that it applies both to provincial and municipal. Right. That's it.
So get rid of amending too, because we said
no, just get rid of the word provincial.
Right. Of course, that makes sense now that we've added municipal. Okay.
Can I just my final go at this, because I do feel that consensus is important, particularly when you have potentially the mayor not on board and and a new board member. And it doesn't mean it's final. I just am wondering how you would feel about just a little bit more wordsmithing. And if you don't, it's fine, I get it. But to say that the board send letters requesting meetings with the ministry and municipality to discuss the provincial board appointment process to ensure appointments being made are open, transparent, and completed with an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens. So just get out of the amending for right now. And the other reason I'm suggesting that is, in my experience, when you go in to a meeting and it's kind of telling what it is that you're going to discuss, it doesn't, it creates difficulties for a discussion back and forth. And sometimes it depends on who is behind the desk that you're meeting with. They're just going to sort of give you 5 minutes and nothing will be accomplished then. And I don't know that it's, I don't know that a first step in a meeting and getting to know people and build the relationship necessarily needs to rely on amend the word amending just at this early process. But I'm in your hands, Susan. I know this is an important issue to you, and I'm not trying to take away from that. I'm just trying to add something that might allow us to come together as a team or a group.
So is that, Ms. Walker, is that a question directed to Chair Toth? And if so, Chair Toth, you wish to comment?
Listen, I think this isn't just something that's important to me. So I think that's the starting point. This is something that's important to every single diverse person that I talk to. And I am cautious about this idea that I, as a person of color, need to soften my tone and need to take a softer approach and need to not make presumptions when I see for myself how these appointments are being made, not just police services, but across the board. It's 2021. I'm actually frankly shocked that we have to have this discussion at all. This should come as no surprise to anyone. So to go in presuming that, oh, this is a first time discussion and we're not really sure, does that really, do you really feel? I said I was tired before. I'm actually more tired now. This conversation has been dominated by, I think, is showing actually exactly why we need more diverse voices, to be completely honest with you. And I'm not taking away from the very thoughtful discussion we're having at all. But unless you've lived it, this is all academic. And so I'm just a little concerned that we're so focused on being softer. Again, I'm not prepared to make amendments. I'm completely fine with this not being consensus based. It doesn't need to be. Not everything is. So this is that is the motion, and that's the one I'm not prepared to make any further changes.
Mr. Presiding Officer, just on a point of privilege, I would like to say that under no circumstance was I trying to soften it or tell you to soften it. It's not what I would ever tell a woman or a woman from a diverse background. I wouldn't do that. I was just trying to find a way that we could come together and support this and move forward collectively, because I always have found in my experience that consensus is always more successful than not at least trying to find it. That was all I was trying to do. And I'm sorry if if I disrespected you, because that was not my intent.
Thank you for that point of clarification, Ms. Walker. Okay. It is now 3:15 p.m. Are there any further comments from board members before we move to the vote on the motion that's on the floor? Okay, seeing no hands, I will, for posterity's sake, just read it one last time. That the board sends letters requesting meetings with the ministry and municipality to discuss amending the board appointment process to ensure appointments being made are open and transparent and completed with an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens. All right. Let's call the vote here. I suspect there'll be some opposition. So all in favor, can I please by show of hands? 1, 2, 3. Okay, and those opposed? 1 there. So, so that motion passes. Jenna, did you get the numbers there or the names?
Well, I never got a seconder. So like, I know it's Susan's motion, but did I miss who seconded? Because we just did the vote then.
I thought, well, I guess we need a seconder on the amended motion, right? I thought Jesse,
Yeah.
sorry, Councillor Helmer had seconded it initially, but
Yeah.
that was on the previous iteration. So, Councillor Helmer, would your previous seconding of the motion still stand? Thank you. All right. So mover, Chair Toth, seconder, Councillor Helmer, and then the vote is what the vote was. So,
Right.
all right.
Thanks.
So with that, the motion is passed, and I will now return the chair seat back to Ms. Toth. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chabar. Jen, remind me, did we actually pass the motion receiving the 3 letters? Okay, that was done. Okay, excellent. So the next item on the agenda is an update on the anti-racism advisory panel. You already know about the 2 letters. We've already discussed that. I just wanted to highlight a really neat part of the work that the anti-racism advisory panel did last month, and that was reviewing the new fair and impartial policing procedure. So it was fantastic. Deputy Chief Betts forwarded that policing procedure to ARAP to review, and everyone had the opportunity to give some feedback and some comments. And it was really an interesting and fantastic use of that panel to be able to provide such direct and have such a direct impact on those procedures. So I wanted to thank the chief and deputy chief for that opportunity. I know that the panel really enjoyed doing that work and really took it very, very seriously, the privilege of being asked to provide those comments. And I know that they were very thoughtful and very well articulated as well. And just one final note on the panel. What's also has been really great about that panel is it gives an opportunity to different members to bring forward things that are happening in their own community. And then connecting it with policing. So we discussed Pastor Thomas, who's on the panel, is involved with the first Black Community London Library, and there were immediate voices saying we'd like to volunteer from police. So there's a lot of connections happening between the community and the police through that panel, which I'm really, really proud to be involved with. It's really quite exceptional. And next, we have also incredible work coming from the Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Panel. And Ms. Walker, was there a meeting since the last board meeting that you can update us about?
The update I have for you is that the co-chairs, Ms. Foster and I met to discuss a plan moving forward. It's been a little bit delayed because of health issues, but I think we're getting back on track.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we'll look forward to another update at the next board meeting. You'll see that it's still on the agenda, but for everyone's information, there was going to be a Coast presentation that has been postponed to March. So we'll be hearing from Coast at that point in time. Just an FYI, it's still on the agenda, but it'll actually be dealt with in March. And next up, we have the care and control of people in custody audit results, Deputy Chief Betts. And I believe Inspector Harvey is here. He might be in oh, there he is. Okay, excellent. The both of you are here, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I'm going to ask that Inspector Harvey share his screen just as a backdrop while I give a quick introduction here. So it's my pleasure to join with Inspector Harvey of the Corporate Services Division to bring the board an update regarding the extensive review of our procedures and processes related to the care of those people who come into the custody of the London Police Service. As you may recall, but for the benefit of the entire board, this review was directed by Chief Williams as part of London Police Service's ongoing commitment to continuous improvement. You'll also know, of course, that Chief Williams has frequently made comment about the changing nature of policing. Something you'll appreciate extends to those people who come into our custody. For context, prior to COVID and the introduction of Bill C-75, which introduced new release requirements, more than 8,000 people a year were in custody and passed through the cell block here at 601 Dundas Street annually. So since 2000, and that's of course coinciding with COVID and Bill C-75, that number's been reduced, but it's still in excess of 4,500 people that we have the care and custody of. This changing nature is complicated by an aging infrastructure and a cell block that's not been substantively renovated since London Police Service moved into its current location nearly 50 years ago. It was due to be renovated during the building expansion and renovations that took place in 2012. However, funding was not made available to undertake those renovations at that time. Therefore, in addition to processes and practices, this review also touched on space and design in that cell block. Our officers are highly trained, they're experienced, and they work in a less than an ideal environment. But we know that continuous improvement is predicated on the ongoing improvement of services and processes through incremental and breakthrough improvements. And that's exactly the premise upon which this review was undertaken. Inspector Harvey was tasked to undertake this review in the winter of 2019 and has had carriage of the implementation of a number of enhancements to our practices, processes, and procedures. So at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Inspector Harvey for an overview of his work.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Betts. Just want to confirm that everybody can hear me and can see my screen that I'm sharing. Thank you, Ms. Toth. I am going to just go through a few slides here just to keep the presentation on track. So our strategy for this review basically was premised in 4 points, that being research, review, consultation, and observation. And the research piece related to primarily determine what is best practice in terms of how police manage people in custody. And we looked at some evidence-based research that's occurred around the world in regards to this topic. We reviewed previous material that's on file and has relevance to our management of people in custody. And a really important part of this was to consult with our own members and the people that are the boots on the ground, so to speak, to find out where improvements in their eyes can be made. And then we actually spent some time observing how we actually do business. So these are the 4 strategies that we took as part of this review. And the review itself resulted in a number of recommendations. And those recommendations, and the key ones I'm going to review here in a moment, the recommendations themselves could be looked at through 4 different categories. The first one being procedural, relating to our internal governance and our practices internally. Operationally, how we actually are delivering our services, and as well in regards to some of the equipment and the technology that we use in regards to the management of people in custody here. And there's always a training element to everything, and whether we're providing the best possible training that we can. So I'll review just some of the key recommendations. First one being we made significant improvements to the information that we gather when we take someone into our custody, because we really need to know about that person to identify any health and other related concerns so they can be properly managed. And we made improvements so that we do a better job of monitoring the people that are in our custody and providing them with any medical or other supports that they need while they're with us. And as Deputy Chief Betts mentioned, facility improvements were also an important part of this, because our facility does show its age, and there were some health and safety things that we were able to address to assist both our own members in their wellness as well as the people that are in our custody. A key change that we've made is in relation to the separation of our prisoner care duties and the charge processing or the administrative duties. And we're able to make these changes through the reallocation of the headquarters detention unit sergeants back to the patrol sections, as well as the assignment of some new resources within our support services division to help with this separation of the prisoner care component from the administrative charge processing piece. And we also changed some of our other deployment practices to help bolster the number of officers and members that we have on duty within the detention unit. And due to other legislative changes and related changes within the policing industry, we have experienced a significant reduction in both the number of people that we have in our custody and in the amount of time that we hold these people in our custody. We have made significant improvements in regards to how we move prisoners around and as well as how we manage the property that they have with them when they come into our custody. And as I mentioned before, technology in some of our systems we were able to improve significantly to help with the security and the management of unforeseen things that sometimes happen with persons in custody. And we've done a better job now of integrating our staff and our operations between those on duty in the detention unit with those involved in patrol operations. And historically, they've kind of been sort of separate, isolated parts of the police operation, but we very much have them much better integrated now, which is proving to be beneficial. And I mentioned there are training and specific skills in regards to prisoner management and dealing with difficult prisoners, as well as some specific equipment that's required in the detention units. And we've enhanced our training there. And overall, we've updated basically all of our internal procedures that relate to the management of people that are in our custody, right from the point of arrest to when they perhaps are released or taken to court. So all of our procedures have been given very careful review, and they've all been updated in one form or another. So I'm happy to report that all of the recommendations have now been initiated, or some of them are actually completely implemented now. We have new resources in place, which is making new and reallocated resources in terms of personnel in place, which are making a significant difference. Training is ongoing, and there's been some facility improvements already realized. Procedural changes are continue to be ongoing because there's somewhat of a cycle that has to play out with those. Procedures are updated, and as Ms. Toth mentioned earlier, our new fair and impartial policing procedure was part of this specific project, and it's been created and is in the process of being implemented, and training specific to that new procedure is being developed. And that is my report, Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Blair, and Chair, through you, I just want to really commend the work of Inspector Harvey on this. He of course didn't act alone, but he was the point person on this particular review and was supported by tremendous people who all have other full-time jobs here at London Police Service, but who recognize the value of what has been done here. And of course, through the support of Deputy McIntyre and lending us some of those folks from the operational side who could really help with this. And of course, under the leadership of Chief Williams, we were able to make some really substantive changes here. So subject to any questions, that's our update as we had promised when we undertook this review.
Thank you so much, Deputy Chief Betts, and Inspector Harvey. Incredible work that you've put into this, and such important work as well. Really appreciate how much it takes to deep dive into those issues and then be willing to make the changes for the safety and security of the officers and for people in custody. So much appreciated. Does anyone on the board have any questions for either Inspector Harvey or for Deputy Chief Betts? It's always a good sign when there are no questions. Usually that means that your report and your presentations were comprehensive and well thought out. So thank you again for your time and for waiting for us to get to this item on the agenda. Could I have a mover and a seconder that we receive for informational purposes the report and presentation with respect to care and control of people in custody? Moved by Ms. Branscombe, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you again. And that is our meeting. A quick note, I mentioned that Coast presentation was going to be next month. That's not the case. Ms. Foster pointed out that it's going to be sometimes later in this year. We don't know quite when, but it's not going to be next month either. But hopefully before the end of the year, we'll have that interim update from Coast. There is no new business. Next public board meeting will be Thursday, March 24th. So hopefully I'll see everyone there and then. And I just need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Chabar, seconded by Ms. Branscombe. All in favor? And that is carried. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.